Let's talk about Now You See Me, where the characters are so autistic they might as well be written by James Gunn. First off, magicians. Already autistic coded, doesn't matter. You're telling me you spend hours and hours practicing incredibly precise motor skills in front of a mirror so that you can put on a performance, turn sensation into your plaything, be applauded, and occasionally feel like you get to turn the tables and be in charge of somebody else's agency for once, and you're not autistic? That last one isn't really a diagnostic criteria for autism, but is a very common experience among autistic people. If you didn't know, many autistic people feel like their bodily autonomy and their agency have been consistently stripped from them throughout their life by authority figures and especially medical professionals. So for a lot of autistic people, asserting their agency can be a liberating, freeing experience. Obviously, that can be done in an unhealthy way, but there are also a lot of healthy ways to do it. For example, magicians often give their audience something called a forced choice, where they give the audience a choice, but something about that choice means that you're going to choose what they want you to choose. Like when Danny asks his audience,
I'm going to flip through this deck, and I want you to see one card.
I picked a card along with them.
That was too fast. I'll do it again.
And I picked the card that he wanted me to pick, because he lingers on the 7 of diamonds slightly longer.
That was too fast. I'll do it again.
So he asks the audience to make a choice, but he knows which choice you're going to make. That's why this trick works, even though it's crowd magic, and his volunteer never told everyone which card she picked, because he knew that everyone in the crowd was gonna pick the same card. That's the kind of forced choice that I'm talking about. One of them is a mentalist. Mentalism is literally just hyper-awareness of otherwise unnoticeable social cues, the sort of thing that autistic people learn to do as a survival method. The mentalist is also a hypnotist, and hypnosis, especially stage hypnosis, is just writing social scripts. And I mean that quite literally. I know some hypnotists who will sit down and write a script. And Dave Franco's character, his whole thing is just noticing what other people don't notice, to the point that he knows that you won't notice it. Sure, all magicians are like that. It's a fundamental part of stage magic. But for Dave Franco's character, it's his whole thing. That's why he's able to pickpocket and fake his death and do that whole awesome magic fight scene in the apartment. Jesse Eisenberg's character is introduced with one defining trait. He has Tism-Riz.
I am your biggest fan.
I can tell by the way you're attacking my face right now.
And Mark Ruffalo's character, oh my gosh, you've gotta be kidding me. His twist used to really bug me, but it's grown on me over the years. I have a Patreon exclusive video about why. But for today, the point is, he spent 30 years crafting a persona that he could enact justice because the system wouldn't give him the justice he craved. That's an autistic person. And his hoodie looks very sensory friendly. I can see a lot of my autistic friends wearing this. Even the marks in these movies are very obviously autistic. Take a look at Morgan Freeman's character. How much more autistic can you get than, I want to bring justice to people because they lie to you? And this isn't a fan theory just for the sake of adding another tally mark to the representation boxes. I'm not exactly starved for representation. And if I want to talk about autistic representation in heist movies, I can talk about actually autistic actors who have come out as autistic and who played in heist movies, like Wentworth Miller playing in Prison Break, or Anthony Hopkins playing in Collide, or I could talk about Ed Norton's canonically autistic character in The Score. No, saying these characters are autistic adds meaning to the film. I love the characters, the way they're set up in the intro scene. I always felt like the intro scene was setting up completely different characters than the rest of the movie. Like, this is a great intro scene for a different movie. Danny introduces this charismatic Casanova who cares more about his career than his conquests.
You need to leave.
Because he's just that good at getting women in bed that he doesn't even need to think about it anymore. But for the rest of the movie, he's just an asshole.
First rule of magic. Always be the smartest guy in the room.
So he never gets to use his charisma or his sex appeal for the sake of the heist. The intro is introducing a completely different character, both of whom are played by Jesse Eisenberg. Henley is introduced as this adrenaline junkie daredevil who loves to bear it all and risk it all. And then, for the rest of the movie, she never gets to bear it all. And she never gets to risk it all. And she never gets to do daredevil stuff. Somebody gets to do daredevil stuff, and it's not Henley, it's Jack! And Jack is introduced as this ambitious pickpocket who wants to be the best in the world, but all he's able to do right now is occasionally swipe somebody's wallet. And then for the rest of the movie, the ambition goes away and he never gets to pick a pocket. Somebody gets to pick a pocket in this movie, and it's not Jack, it's Danny. Or at least, this is the closest we get to seeing pickpocketing after the intro. And Jack's ambition is replaced with a different personality trait, his insecurity about his youth. And Merrick? Okay, Merrick stays basically the same person for the entire movie. The intro is an accurate depiction of who Merrick McKinley is. He is a scammy mentalist and hypnotist, and that's it. But I'm realizing what this intro does set up is that these are all top-notch performers who are each on a different part of the autism spectrum. It's not setting up their skills, it's not setting up their personality, it's not setting up the heist, it's setting up their autism. And I know, that sounds a little unhinged, but once you get that these characters are autistic, that's setting up everything else you need to know for the rest of the movie. Like, this scene here...
You little shit. You little shit. What game you playing? What game you playing? We're all good at 6, move to 7.
Feels like it came out of nowhere, like when did Jack become a mimic? Until I was in the middle of editing this video and realized he's doing autistic mimicry. Literally. They're just heightening the idea of accent mimicry the same way that they're heightening the idea of magic tricks. And I always understood why the mastermind is doing all this. Rhodes is very clear about his motivations, but I never entirely understood why the Four Horsemen were on board. I kind of just assumed it's a heist movie. They're going to be on board. Besides, they get to do really cool magic tricks on really big stages. Of course they're on board. But I didn't really get their character motivations until I was making this video and realized their entire character motivations stem from their autism. The whole movie, the Four Horsemen's motivation is that they know they're the best, and they just want to be recognized for their abilities and achievements by the governing body who only lets in the best.
You're in.
Now, is any of this good autistic representation? I don't think the movie cares. Don't get me wrong, representation is important, and perfect representation is always the goal we strive for. But if you think about it, this movie decided that accurate representation of magic is just not one of its priorities. Sure, the magic tricks are accurate in the first one. In the second one, they just throw away the idea of pretending that it's accurate. But even in the first one, you can tell accuracy was not the priority. Awesomeness was the priority. And so if these movies about magic didn't prioritize accurate representation of magic, I don't think they put a very high priority on good representation for autism. What I'm surprised about is that this movie that is so full of autistic characters is really not made for autistic people. There are so many flashing lights in these movies and so much disregard for detail and for following the rules of the universe, and those are not things that autistic people tend to deal with generally very well. Now, I'm not saying that autism is a monolith. I'm not even saying that this franchise treats autism as a monolith. I'm saying exactly the opposite. This franchise has a bare minimum of 8 different autistic characters, each of which act completely different from each other because autism is a spectrum. And each character is showing a wildly different part of the spectrum. Now, why wouldn't the movies come out and say that they're autistic? My guess? Because it goes without saying. Now You See Me is a movie that runs on vibes, not details. If a detail is important, it's gonna bring it up later. If not, it doesn't want you to pay attention to the little nitty-gritty details. It wants you to pay attention to the big picture.
And do you see your card here?
No.
That's because you're looking too closely.
It treats the idea of
Come in close. Closer.
like it's tempting you, taunting you, daring you to look at the trees instead of the forest. Why?
Because the more you think you see, the easier it'll be to fool you.
It opens with a statement that when you look for specific details, you're not being objective. You are still subjectively filtering things through your own lenses and biases and perceptions, and that you are still making meaning. At the very least, you are making meaning about what is worth noticing.
Because what is seeing? You're looking, but what you're really doing is filtering, interpreting, searching for meaning.
And the easiest way for me to make meaning in this movie is to filter everything through a simple through line. These characters are autistic. And it keeps reminding you to look for the vibes, don't look closely at the details. Because
What have I been telling you all night? The closer you look,
The less you see.
check out my Patreon for an exclusive video about the twist ending behind Now You See Me and to help fund my heist movie. Follow for more heist movies.